You guys have all finished eating, hopefully, and now we can talk about raw meat. So hopefully it's appetizing enough, because now first I embarrassed myself, and now I'm going to make you guys physically ill. That's my game plan. I know it's unusual. Other people zig, I zag. That's what marketers do. So the story I want to tell you is about raw meat, and it involves two people. It involves a man by the name of Eldon Roth and a woman by the name of Bettina Siegel. So Eldon Roth, in 1981, started a company called Beef Products International. And what BPI did is it figured out a process through which they could take the remaining pieces of meat that were stuck to bone and sinew and would otherwise be discarded on the cutting room floor, able to extract those pieces of meat, put them together, package it into something he called lean textured beef, and sell it en masse to companies like McDonald's, Taco Bell, school districts around the United States. Now, this process, which was deemed safe, multiple times by the, United States, the USDA, the FDA, all the regulatory agencies, enabled Mr. Roth to grow a business that over the course of 20 years employed 2,000 people in 4 plants in 4 different states and was selling billions of dollars worth of lean textured beef. Now, what was interesting about this process is that it actually used ammonia in one of the steps of the creation. But again, deemed safe multiple times. Now, in 2002, a government regulator wrote a report about Mr. Roth's process, and he was a little bit offended the fact that he was using ammonia and it was all this leftover pieces of meat, and he called it pink slime. But in 2002, that report sat in a binder on a shelf somewhere in Washington, D.C., and as a native and a current resident of Washington, D.C., I can tell you there are a lot of reports like that sitting around that nobody read, and did nothing. Fast forward 10 years, and Bettina Siegel, who is a Harvard Law School graduate turned mommy/food blogger in Houston, Texas, starts to research what food is being served to her children in the Houston public school system. Jim, shout out to Houston, right? So she discovers that, in fact, it's Mr. Roth's lean textured beef. And then she discovers this government bureaucrat's report calling it pink slime. And again, multiple times it had been deemed safe. But that's no okay for Bettina Siegel. So what does she do? She starts a petition on a Thursday night demanding that the Houston public school system stop serving Mr. Roth's lean textured beef, pink slime. Well, over the course of the weekend, she garnered 137,000 signatures. By Monday, you can kind of see where this little thing takes off. The social media firestorm picks up, hits the mainstream, and pretty soon, Mr. Roth's business is reeling. Now, keep in mind, 2,000 people employed. The man's in the Nebraska Business Hall of Fame. I know Darren's been trying to accomplish that goal. Good luck. Had accomplished a lot. But now, totally unprepared for the rise of the Bettina Siegels of the world. Well, the Secretary of Agriculture, who used to be the governor of Iowa, says, no, it's totally fine. But the media firestorm continues. McDonald's cancels their contract. Taco Bell cancels their contract. School districts have to cancel their contract. Basically, Mr. Roth has to lay off 80% of his workforce, shut down 3 of his factories, and basically run on a skeleton crew. All because of one mommy blogger. That's what we're here to talk about. We're talking about how the world has fundamentally changed because of the arrival of the connected and empowered customer. Social media is just the glue. It's the people who have all this information and are working with each other. But take a step back from business and look at global movements like protests in Hong Kong, Arab Spring, arguably Obama even getting elected. These things would not have been possible, impossible, in an era where these technologies didn't exist. So now what you're seeing is that more and more people are figuring out, hey, we have these technologies, and we can actually use them to voice our opinions about things, right? So there's this huge problem that brands are facing because for a long time, they didn't have to deal with it. If you had a bad experience with a company, you'd tell 5 or 10 of your friends, maybe you'd send an email to 50 people. Best case scenario, nothing happened. But now more and more people saying, I have a voice, and I know it, and I know I can use it. I have a global platform that's free where people pay attention to me in an earned way. I don't have to buy their attention, right? On the flip side, you start seeing companies saying, wait a second, we can actually use this to build deeper relationships with our customers, right? And that's what's been happening in different companies. So as Jim alluded to, we work with about 1,000 brands around the world, usually with companies that have about $150 million in revenue or larger. So Groupon is one of the companies that said, how do we take advantage of this, right? So Groupon has subsidiaries in 45 countries. And basically what they were trying to figure out is, well, how can we standardize the way that we interact with our audience, with our customers? So they said, we have that problem. The other problem is we need to be much more responsive to our connected customers, right? People can't tweet us and we just say, oh, we'll get back to you in 48 hours, you know? That's not okay anymore. So what they said is, how do we get 45 countries all working off of the same playbook? So what they've been able to do is do exactly that. Now they're sending out over 7,000 custom messages per week. They're hitting their SLA for response time over 97% of the time, which is under 1 hour, which is exactly what the Bettina Siegel connected, empowered customers of the world are talking about. So what we're going to talk about today is the challenges that people are facing, the opportunity that large brands have, that really any company has, but specifically we focus on large brands. And then I'll share with you some examples of companies that are doing it well. And as Darren said, if you have questions during it, feel free to interrupt. If you have some roles that you want to throw at me, that's also okay, especially because obviously I don't know how to work PowerPoint or a microphone. So clearly I've got some issues. So what's happening in businesses is this. What's happening is that as people have information and they're connecting with each other, they understand that they know more about the brand and the companies in their lives than those companies know about themselves. So it is fundamentally changing every aspect of the business to customer relationship. That's where we spend a lot of time talking with people. It's like, it's not about Facebook and Twitter and Line and WeChat and Weibo and VK and all that stuff. Those are nice. But what's really happening now is people understand I don't need to rely on what the company tells me to determine whether in fact this is a good product or a good service. I can rely on my friends. I can rely on my network. And so people say, oh, it's social media. It's just for marketing. No, it's not for marketing. It's affecting every single part of the business experience. It's affecting the way we buy products and the way that we sell products. It's affecting the way that we recruit. In the US, there's a site called Glassdoor. One of our stated corporate goals is to be the #1 company on Glassdoor. Why? What does Glassdoor do? It tells potential employees what is the experience of working at Sprinklr really like. Because the recruiter, and I know there's some recruiters in the room, like, oh yeah, it's the greatest company. We all know that recruiters are full of crap, with all due respect to our recruiters here. You're in sales like the rest of us, right? You're gonna say something, but now where's my retained executive search guy, right? Who, by the way, Roger, he has the greatest system ever. I love him. No, you're gonna license what? Yeah, you should. You should totally. So he comes up to the speaker at the beginning of the event. He's like, just so you know, I have an appointment and I might have to leave early, which is his way of hedging against boring presentations. It's genius. It's totally genius. Because then when he walks out, he's like, oh, he told me he had an appointment. He doesn't have an appointment. He's just telling you. And then if he stays, you're like, oh, God, I must be the greatest presenter ever because he pushed his appointment back just for me. Genius, Roger. It's the Roger principle. I'm totally using it. I love it. You should totally license it, man. Or you could also like open source Creative Commons it, but whatever you want, it's fine. I will pay you for that. That's what I will do. Good man. Anyway, I digress. It's all the jet lag and like 4 coffees this morning, so it happens. Sorry. Anyway, so we cannot tell potential employees, and we are in the war for talent that everybody talks about, how great it is at Sprinklr if it's not great at Sprinklr, because they will go to Glassdoor and see that, oh, we work these guys to the bones, the VP of marketing is an idiot, and so on and so forth, right? You can't do that. That's a fundamental change that did not exist in the recruiting world 10 years ago. Am I right, Grant? I'm right. Thank you. PR. We got our communications guy over here, my Microsoft brother, right? The world of PR has fundamentally changed because now you can't control the message. Like, oh, we have a disaster on a Friday afternoon. We'll wait till Monday to put out a press release. Are you kidding me? You'll be dead by Monday, right? Because now it hits the blogosphere, it hits social media. You cannot control that. So you have to figure out how do we deal in an environment where customers are taking it, even if it's totally unfounded, and they're off and out of control. I talk about marketing at the dinner table. This is what my kids talk. Never Stop Marketing was my company, but I also say it's like a mantra and a way of life. So this is what I do with my kids. But marketing is not about let me just tell you how great I am all the time. It doesn't matter. Marketing is about creating experiences and delivering value so that customers will tell their friends, here's a company that you can trust. That's a fundamental change that only is possible because of the world that we currently live in. And customer care, where it all starts now, this is where the fundamentals are. Now, maybe the numbers are different in Japan and all that stuff. I totally accept that. But the fundamental underlying foundation is exactly the same, and it's the same in every single country that has people with smartphones and connected. I don't think there are too many countries that don't have that right now. I was just reading in the Japan Times today about how people in Iraq are using WhatsApp and Viber to keep in touch with all the people who are struggling to get through Hungary now. And when they get through to Germany, they're saying, oh, I guess you can make it. So those people are talking to each other. They're not using TV. They're not watching CNN. They're using their smartphones and WhatsApp to say, now I'm going to go to Europe. That's a fundamental disruption. Before it would have taken 2 years to find out. Now it takes 2 seconds. That's a big shift. Today, you cannot be a good marketer if you don't understand what's happening in your customer care organization, because that's where it all starts, right? And what happens when we have bad experiences? We leave. Why? Because we know what good experiences are. The guy from Airbnb was at our event yesterday. You talk about Uber, right? And you say, oh, why can't I have Uber everywhere? Or why can't I have Airbnb or whatever it is? Because you know what a great experience is because all your friends are posting their stuff on Instagram and Facebook and all this stuff. So now your own expectations are heightened. So when you don't get that experience from your provider, you're like, why am I putting up with this nonsense? I should go to the other one. Because before you didn't know how bad you had it. Now you know, right? So you have a bad experience, you leave. You have 2 bad experiences, you really leave. And this is my personal favorite money stat of the day. Take your picture, put this on your wall. This is where the world will come down to. The battlefield is customer experience. And it's not just, I have a great product. It's not just, I deliver great service. It's everything. We were talking about events before and how difficult it is to measure people's experience at events, right? And we were joking that, Darren works his butt off. This guy is amazing. By the way, when he quits Verizon, I'm going to hire him at Sprinklr. But I can't afford him probably, so we'll have to work on that. But the guy sits down and he executes and he drives, right? But we always say that, you put on an event like this, and there's always one person who's like, wow, the speaker was amazing. Thank you. The speaker was amazing. The food was great, but, the room was too hot. The room was too cold. The guy, he lost my coat at the coat. There's always one thing that they're going to complain about, right? But that's the life cycle of the customer experience, and that's what we remember. You could fly on the most beautiful plane and have the best seats and all that stuff, but if they lose your luggage, crappy experience, right? So it's everything from A to Z in the experience. So that's, and if you're not delivering top notch, somebody else will, and everybody else will know about it. So when we think about what is experience, it's not a one-moment thing. You don't just say, oh, I talked to the U.S. Embassy, and I had one moment, and it was great, and that's my experience. It's all the engagement moments that you have over time. But let's take a step back and think about how challenging it is to deliver meaningful and relevant engagement at every single point of interaction that large companies have with their audiences around the world at one time. Here's the equation. I met with the chief digital officer of Nissan last time I was in town. He's a member here, if I'm not mistaken. And he said, this is the most important slide in the whole deck. I like the 89%, he likes this one, so we'll go with him. He says, this is what I'm trying to help people understand. We have Nissan, Renault, Datsun. We're in like 260 countries. I didn't even know there were 260 countries, right? I'm joking, I knew that. No. And then you think about what are the number of channels that we have. TV, phone, radio. There are over 100 social networks now alone with at least 1 million members, right? We support the 23 biggest ones, but they're all out there, and that's where customers are talking about, and they're expecting the same consistent interaction at every single one of those touch points. So take a regular, small, medium-sized brand, right? You got what? 12 business units, 8, what we call front office functions, sales, marketing, customer care, so on, number of channels, and then you multiply geography. You're already looking at nearly 9,000 touch points, right? Where Mike Benner decides, I want to be treated like Mike, not like Mike 1, 2, 3 and Mike ABC and this version of Mike and that version of Mike and confusing it with the other guy who lives in Los Angeles or whatever. That's not what I want. And if you don't treat me that way, what have I done? You haven't delivered me a great experience, and I'm going to go to someone who does. That's what happens, right? So there again, I just like to drive it home because it all comes down to the experience. But the challenge is most companies are not keeping up with this change and this change in expectation and customer experience, and it's affecting them. They're not responding quickly the way Groupon is. They don't even have a plan in many cases. And the worst case scenario, for those of you who are like, what's the ROI on this? It's costing them money. It's not just Groupon delivering millions of dollars of measurable ROI because they're actually driving 97% SLA and they can connect more satisfied customers equals higher revenue. You don't respond, people leave. You don't respond, people tell their friends, which raises your customer acquisition costs. Those are the fundamental disruptors that we're facing right now. So let's talk for a second about how companies for the last couple years have tried to attack this problem. The first thing they do is they say, okay, we have a bunch of things we have to do just to engage with these customers. We need to run campaigns. We need to have publishing. We need to do analytics. We need to manage our assets. We need to do all this stuff. And that's true. They do need to do all of this stuff. But what happens? For the last 40, 50, 80 years or so, companies have been built for internal operational efficiency, not for external experience, delivery, and engagement. So what happens? First off, the marketing team's like, hey, we need to do all this stuff. So we're going to go procure all of these point solutions and publish and report and engage. Okay. Then the customer care team's like, hey, we need to do all this stuff too. So we're going to go procure all of these point solutions so we can publish, report, engage, run campaigns, and so on and so forth. And then you start seeing this go across every silo within the organization. So what happens? Each team builds their own sort of Franken suite of technologies. But in the meantime, Ryan over here has 8 different experiences with the brand. And as we've already beaten the horse and it's totally dead, Ryan doesn't want 8 different experiences with the brand. Ryan wants one great, relevant experience every single time. And because these functional silos don't talk to each other, they think there are 8 Ryans. But there's only one. And that's not okay with Ryan. So Ryan goes somewhere else and it hurts them. And that's an inconsistent experience. And when you have inconsistent experiences without any type of governance, you have situations where interns can destroy your brand. I like putting this up there just because it says F-bomb up there. So that's just, there's really no, I'm kidding. You don't have those controls. You don't have that oversight so that you can see at a corporate level who's doing what, where, when, with which customer. That's not okay. So what happens now is companies are like, oh yeah, we're totally committed to customer experience. We deliver a great customer experience. They might think they do, but who cares what companies think? It's what do you as a consumer think? And the reality is most of us think that most of the time we're not getting a great customer experience, right? And that's what's happening. Padramasi Warrior is phenomenal. You should check her out, read her stuff. This customer is fundamentally changing the game for companies. So let's talk a little bit about the opportunity for you and for the people you know. So I fundamentally believe that there's someone in organization now who can be the superhero of this next wave. The challenge right now is, as we pointed out, right now the social empower customer is bouncing around all those 8,640 touch points. So as a result, it's really everybody's problem, but it's also nobody's problem, which makes it hard to solve, right? So you're looking for who's going to step up and really say, okay, we need to create a consistent vision for what our customer experience should be. What is the experience of coming to the ACCJ? What's the experience at the Tokyo American Club? What do we want that to be? And then how do we drive that vision for the experience into every nook and cranny, right? into the way the room's set up, into what the food is, into what the speakers are, and how we schedule our events. What does the invite look? All of those things are experiential touch points, and someone has to drive that. It's great that Darren can do it with his team, with everyone else here. Not a problem. Your Nissan, your Nike, your Samsung, right? Edward, stand up. Edward was the guy who put together the whole global content strategy for Samsung, 70 countries. So he knows a thing or two about doing it at scale. How do you then integrate with all of your legacy systems that you've already spent hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of doing? How do you engage across the enterprise? It's not just marketing, it's not just customer care. It's your recruiters, it's your public relations professionals, it's your analyst relations, and how do you do it in a way that interns aren't dropping F-bombs? So what companies are looking to do now is, how do we create an enterprise-wide system of engagement that sits on top of all of this legacy stuff and integrates with an exploding number of social channels, so that you can have this integrated infrastructure where you have all of the capabilities, but they all work together so that you can do this in one way. And when you put that infrastructure, I call it an enterprise engagement platform, on top of the legacy systems, what happens? Well, what happens is you have a framework for doing 5 things. 1, for managing conversations. You get to know, oh, this is what I talked about with Roger last time. Because next time I see you, and I don't make fun of you for the fact that you gave me the prea culpa for my event, then it's like, this guy Jeremy doesn't remember me. My friend invented the prea culpa. I thought that was a good idea. Then you're like, I don't really have a relationship with you because you have to reintroduce yourself to me. Relationships are based, and experiences are based on conversations building over time. So you have to, but for one-on-one, relatively easy. You have some forgetful people, but relatively easy. Global scale, relatively difficult. You have to have that, though, because that's what customers expect. You need a way to manage your community. I need to know that Timothy here is a big-time influencer. I need to know that Douglas over there is a reporter for Nikkei Shimbun or whatever it is. And if I know that, then I know how to interact with that person accordingly. I'm going to treat a customer and a prospect different than I would a competitor. If you can't do that at global scale, how are you going to be able to drive the experience that you want? How are you going to be able to collaborate? The number of people who put up promotional stuff, say on Facebook, like, hey, let's, here's our new shirt or whatever, and somebody writes a comment like, oh, I bought this shirt, it's a piece of crap. Okay, now that marketer has a customer care problem. What are they going to do? They're going to copy, paste, send an email to who? Who do you send it to if you're Microsoft and you have 90,000 people? How do I know where to send it? Well, you got to take it, drop it into a queue that says this is a customer care problem, and have that routed appropriately within the SLA framework so you can time it. If you're not doing that, you can never collaborate and never deliver the experience. You have no choice. So you got to figure out how to collaborate, right? But we're not just here to respond to people, we're here to drive the business. You need to be able to execute campaigns in multiple countries, on multiple channels, and be able to measure those in a unified way to know, hey, are the things that we're doing in China more effective or less effective than the stuff we're doing in Germany and France? If you're operating on multiple platforms and getting multiple Excel spreadsheets from multiple agencies, you have no clue. And then when your CMO boss comes and asks you, you look like an idiot. I don't think there are too many people that's their career objective, right? And finally, you need to manage content. And I told you, Edward's the Jedi master of this. And as the story I use is about Samsung all the time, which is, when Samsung releases, and Edward, even if I make up some of the facts, don't correct me, just let me roll, exactly. Hopefully it's close enough. The story's kind of been retold so much, but the basic gist is, as you know, Samsung will release their products in Asia, then they'll release them in Europe, and then they'll release them in North America. Now Samsung, like many companies, spends a boatload of money on content. How do you know what content's working? How do you make sure that the best content gets pushed? So what happens is, they take their product box shots, they create their videos, and they deploy it all in Asia. Well, by the time they roll it out in Europe, they can say, well, we know that these are the best performing images for click-through. Let's use those. These are the videos that are best served on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or whatever. Use those, ignore the other ones. So the company gets smarter over time. It's not just sitting in a repository somewhere. It's becoming a learning end. It's like Amazon recommends for content, right? Use this video if you want to publish on Twitter at this time and you're targeting women in France. Much more about, by the way, this agency's terrible at delivering content. This agency's great at delivering content. The amount of money that companies spend And the amount of money you can save them or help them to be more effective, enormous. So when you do all that, then you are positioned to deliver a consistent and relevant experience to your customers at every single one of those touch points, which you have to do, right? So let's talk for a second about who's doing it well, and I'll give you some of the examples out there. So Jim actually alluded to Citi. Now, Citi, as you know, is one of the largest banks on the planet, and they had multiple customer care applications. They've started to get more and more inbound inquiries via social channels, but they were totally unpositioned or poorly positioned to handle it. So they said, you know what, we need to standardize. We need to create a way so that all of our customer care agents, regardless of where they are, regardless of which channel people come in, are able and informed and capable to get the information and respond. So what they did is they said, we're committing ourselves to customer experience. So they put 150 people initially in 10 countries involving customer care, content teams, legal team, compliance teams, and all doing it within the framework of regulation to reduce their customer care response time by 20%. Similar sort was at John Hancock. I actually got a hug from the lawyers there. It was great, yeah. They were really, sorry, that was like a semi-HR violation, so I'll keep that to myself. They were really nice. Let's just put that way. They actually came up to me and they hugged me, and you know why? Because they said, for the first time, we really feel like we are partners with the business, with the marketers, with the customer care people. Why? Because usually they just look at us as the guys, that's where fun goes to die, right? My wife's a lawyer, so I tell her that too. The kids know that too. They're like, oh, Dad, you can hang out. Mom, fun's dying over there. I'm like, yeah, that's what happens with lawyers. My dad's a lawyer too, whatever. But the point is, she's like, now the marketers and the customer care folks can put in a response to a customer on a social channel, route it through us. We have an SLA to them that says we have to respond within 2 hours or whatever. If we don't, then they have a report that says, guys, you suck and you're not doing your job. And they're like, oh, we do suck. We should do this. Otherwise, we look bad. And they can approve it or respond or whatever. And that allows Hancock and Citi to deliver better experience at the speed of social, which is what customers want, right? Bayer is another one of our clients. Now, they actually had a similar situation to Samsung, but almost in a different way. So their core social team is obviously in Germany. But what they wanted is they wanted to figure out how do we give our smaller regions, like Bulgaria, the insights into not only what we're doing so they can leverage our content more effectively so we can speak at one voice, but also how do we figure out what's happening on the fringes of the company, where in many cases is where innovation happens most effectively, and bring that back into corporate. So that's what they've done. They've put all, I think it's like 50, I'm making numbers up right now. It's like 50 countries where essentially they said, okay, we're on one platform now, so now we can have this one voice that we distribute, and we say, this is how we talk about these things, and then obviously give their local teams the empowerment to make adjustments as necessary. But they've be able to report back and forth on here's what's working well. There was a story about like the country manager in like Lebanon or something, it was like Lebanon or Kazakhstan or something like that, came up with sort of an interesting way of talking. This particular part of the business focuses on animal health. Came up on an interesting way to talk about it. And that was able to get pushed back, which was then leveraged by the team in France with its own slight modifications. In a previous world, what are you going to do? Send 500 emails to people like, hey, what's working in Kazakhstan? How often does that happen? Not very, right? So EMC, many of you know them, they basically said, okay, we got to do the same thing. We're going to try to figure out how do we get all these departments, not just customer care, not just marketing. Most companies don't go all in on day one. I would be lying if I said otherwise. But EMC said, okay, we have all these different functions. How do we get them to work? And this started with the C-suite. The CMO, the CEO have their own interface because say we need to be involved in this as well. And get them all working together and get that alignment because we sound like idiots. I mean, they didn't quite say it that way, but that's basically what they were referring to. Our client at IHG, the hotel chain, he said, the reason we went with Sprinklr is because it was sort of similar to the campaign example I gave before, which is we have 7 different brands. I think that's what I wrote. No, 8. See, can't even remember my own slides. 8 different brands on 3 different continents. There's no way for me to report up what's working in China versus North America versus Europe. Because in China, we have like the Mandarin brand or whatever it's called. You know, in the US, we have like the, the Intercontinental and what have you, and Holiday Inn and so on. And there's no way for us to say, oh, here's what's working for this brand in North America and compare it in a meaningful way to here's what's working for this brand in China. That's the only way we can do this. And the only way I can go to my CMO and say, you need to invest here or not invest here or what have you. You can't do that without an enterprise-wide engagement platform. I used to have this slide called Tired of Losing, but they told me that it would probably offend the client, so I changed it to a plan to win, right? So no secret that for a while the Republicans were getting their asses handed to them by the Democrats in pretty much every election, right? So this guy, Chuck, at the RNC said, okay, we got to figure out a way to compete. So they, as you would expect, have a massive legacy system infrastructure in terms of voter registration, donor, have all that. But what they put on top of it was this social engagement layer that we've been talking about. And they said, okay, how do we connect what people are saying down to the county level with the information that we have in our back-end systems so that leading up to the election, they could say to candidates in Arkansas, you know, talk about Ebola, which was big at the time. Amazing to think how that's like disappeared, right? and versus North Carolina, where they could be like, talk about how much you hate Obama or whatever it was. So they were pinpointing down to the county level and displaying that in real time on their command center so that they could inform their local teams how to talk about things with slightly different messaging, right? So they had the global awareness, connected it to all this information, and they go, oh, the people who are complaining in Alaska, they're not Republicans. They're never gonna vote for us anyway, so ignore them. Before, you're just like, hey, if you just pick up social chatter, you're like, oh, people are really upset about this. But if you connect it to your back end, you're like, yeah, those guys aren't going to vote for us anyway, but the big money donors, they're upset about this. Maybe you should talk about that. That's insights that in a previous world was impossible to garner, but that's exactly what they did. And my favorite thing is it came out on election day when they won the House back in November, a year ago roughly. And there was a whole article that says, oh, here's what the RNC is doing, and they're using Sprinklr or whatever. And like 2 hours later, the Democratic National Committee hit our website. It was so cool. I was like, my PR woman, she's like super liberal, and she's like, I can't get a PR article about the Republicans. And I was like, Juliana, listen. We're like, please don't quote or tweet this part, because that would be offensive. But you can, by the way, tweet nonstop with the @Sprinklr. But this part, okay, then I'm not good memory. No, that's okay, whatever. Thanks, Jim. That's why I love you, man. There you go. No, I basically said, look, we're like Microsoft. We're giving the software to whoever can benefit from it, and we want them to be successful, you know? I'm sorry, that, if 50% of the U.S. is going to vote for Republicans, they're not like a fringe group, you know? I won't sell to like the KKK or the neo-Nazis. That's drawing the line, but up until there, it's good. So I was like, you know what? Tell a great story, make our customers successful. That's the business we're in. And if the Democrats want our help, we're happy to help them too, for 4 times the price. No, just kidding. We already know it works, right? You might as well. I'm gonna pay for this one in a big way. I'm going off script. I'm like, this is like somehow this whole empowered customer thing's gonna take me down. It's just a question. It's just a question of when. Anyway, let's move on before the hole gets even deeper than at first I blew up. I thought I was getting myself out, but I feel like I'm going back. I'm like the Japanese economy. I haven't really come out of it yet, right? Can I just leave now? God, it's really hot in here, isn't it? Food wasn't so good, right? All right, let's give a shout out to my former employers at Microsoft, Jonathan's as well. I'm using a Microsoft Surface Pro 3. I highly recommend it. It's good stuff on Windows 10, I might add. What Microsoft's done is they said, look, we know that the era of fighting specifically on, not even fighting, like you own Windows, you must buy Windows again. That era's over, right? I'm sure there are more Macs in this room than Windows, would be my guess. And there's certainly no Windows phones in this room. In fact, I saw a guy yesterday with a Windows phone. I was about to say, you must work for Microsoft, because And that can be on video because I've said it to my friends at Microsoft. They're like, yeah, we know. Nobody uses Windows phones except for us. It's fine. But what I will give Microsoft credit for and Satya Nadella credit for is these guys are reinventing themselves to focus on customer experience. And they're focusing on how do we compete in this world of Android and Apple and stuff where it's not just you're locked into our desktop, because that doesn't work anymore. So they said we have multiple brands: Windows, Office, Skype, Xbox, so on and so forth. What? Bing. Somebody had to throw Bing out, of course. I was doing so well until Bing came along. No. Although they do have their new Microsoft Edge browser, which shows promise, but I don't know, we'll see. Entrenched habits are hard to change. Different topic. But they're saying, look, it's not just, what's Bing's name back there? Bing, you're the new chairman, dude. What? John. So John might be the CIO of a large, company that owns Microsoft Dynamics CRM, but you also might be an active Xbox gamer, right? Wouldn't that be cool for Microsoft to know? And that's exactly what they've done, right? So they've started to stitch those profiles together so that 1,800 people around the company, and they've profiled multiple millions of their customers. So they know John is a CIO at an enterprise company or a mid-sized business or whatever. He is an Xbox gamer, what have you. And he's the one who asked us to build Office for the iPad. In fact, that's actually a cool story. They took all that information, and they said, like 2 years ago, somebody's like, hey, when are you going to build Office for the iPad or Office for Android? And they're like, oh, yeah, well, we don't have it. So a year and a half later, when they released it, they went back to all of those people. And they said, hey, guys, you asked, we delivered. Maybe it took a little longer than you wanted, but now you have it. That is delivering great customer experience across multiple touch points. These guys are one of the most forward-thinking companies out there in terms of the experience. Nimble Storage, many of you know them as well. They're actually thinking about how do we use social to drive our sales. So they've connected their social infrastructure to their CRM implementation, because they're saying how can we, the same way we might nurture, their marketing automation, they connected to Marketo. How do we use social as the same way we would use sort of email to drive people through, I don't even like to call it the pipeline or the funnel because that feels like a old school mentality, help people along in the buyer's journey, if you will. So if I know that you're at this stage, 40%, how can I use social information to give you something that's relevant so that you'll move to 50% in the process? And they're doing heavy analytics. Where's my big data lady back there, right? Shout out to the Swiss project management team, right? How are they going to use social? So that's the kind of stuff that's happening. And then you're seeing innovation in other places where Intel, the CIO at Intel, said, you know what, we're going to use this we're going to use our social and our community to try to drive revenue for Intel through product innovation, through crowdsourcing, through all these ideas. And she signed up for a quota. I don't know how many CIOs you know who sign up for quotas, but not many. Maybe one. And that's exactly what Kim Stevens did. She said, how do we tap our community in a global way across all these touch points to say, okay, you're at the customer care touch point, we've solved your problem. Now we see that you're an advocate because you had a great experience. Now maybe is an opportunity to say, what ideas do you have about what Intel can do to innovate? And they've started to use that as sort of like a place for idea generation. My personal favorite of all of these is Penney, where they started off sort of really focused on social from a listening perspective and just sort of a marketing and customer care perspective. But what they discovered is that there's these rings, as some of you may know, of shoplifters. And they go into stores, steal a bunch of stuff, and then they put up pictures on Instagram in like these flash sales, or it's like Snapchat. It goes up for like 20 seconds and then it's gone. So people, or 2 minutes or whatever it is. So that's cost them a lot of money. But what is happening is because all that data was getting pulled into Sprinklr's listening before it was deleted, JCPenney was able to say, aha, we see the accounts that these are coming from, and they were able to work with law enforcement to basically shut down some of these rings and put people in jail. So, on the list of use cases I could have come up with, that was not one of them. But a great example of saying, here's a company that's focused on one thing, sees another opportunity of what's happening out there, and now is reducing the risk It's one of three things. They're either driving revenue, they're either delivering better customer experience and customer care, or they're reducing risk. And that's what's happening now across the board for these guys. So basically, if I had to sum it up, and hopefully I've done a semi-convincing job despite the fact that I've had all these mishaps along the way and no one's thrown any bread yet, so I appreciate that. At the end of the day, it's not about Sprinklr and it's not about the technology. It's about, if you want to thrive in this age of social, you've got to figure out how can we manage an experience across all of these silos, across all these touch points. The previous paradigm is gone. It's gone and it's not coming back. You have no choice. That's number one. The second thing is, there has to be some technology to do it. You need the people, you need the process, you need the will to drive what is our experience vision. But you can't operate at global scale without technology. That's no secret. It has to be done. And basically, I think the third part is really, someone's got to stand up and take charge, because it is such a huge paradigm shift. It's what Eldon Roth was not prepared for in the Bettina Siegel world. It's what Chinese government wasn't prepared for with Hong Kong. It's how the fundamental disruption that connected and empowered customers provide mandates that companies and people within those companies say, we've got to figure out a new way to do this. Because not only we need to survive, the only way we're going to thrive is if we start thinking about this from a different perspective. So with that, I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to speak here. Darren, big shout out to you, man. You've been fantastic to work with, and I want to thank you for that. Jim, thank you for your fake introduction. That was great also. Roger, you're still here, man, so feeling the love for you on that one. But with that, I want to thank you guys. It's really been a pleasure, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any, but hopefully my ACCJ street cred has been reestablished. Thank you guys very much. Questions, comments? You just want to go home? Deal with the typhoon? Roger, I love you for it. Sprinklr t-shirt coming your way.
Amazing presentation. Absolutely, thank you. How do clients, your customers, whatever you call them, how do you track their performance or their performance against a baseline, and how do they pay you? In other words, is it based on performance? Is it based on seats, on CPUs? Well, I mean, how do you do that? I'd be very interested to hear about that.
Sure. So, thank you very much. Even if you have to lie, I appreciate that. So, typically, to get the second question out of the way first, we charge on a per seat per month basis. We have it sort of in tiers so that as you get more, it's more predictable as companies grow. Like Microsoft didn't walk in and say, oh, I want 1,800 seats. They start off with 20 and they grow as they start seeing, because typically, the marketing team will be like, oh, we're going to use this, and they'll be like, oh, wait, it's a customer care team. We should really get the customer care guys on. So that's kind of how it expands from there. And we're totally comfortable with that, because we realize you can't go into Nissan and flip the switch overnight. They're just going to change because we think they should. That'd be cool, but that doesn't happen. So the way that's a great question on the measurements too, is for the first couple years of social, everyone was like, oh, it's likes and tweets, and that's nonsense. He said, look, nothing fundamentally changes. You have to drive your business outcomes. You need to grow revenue. You need to reduce risk. Those are fundamentals that have been, here since you first came to Japan a couple years ago, right? Exactly. So what we do with the clients is we do our best. I can't say we always do, but we do our best to never sell software to clients unless we've done an ROI study with them. Because if we don't have that fundamental agreement of what are we hoping to achieve together, is it you want to do your marketing, is you want to have better customer care, whatever it is, then how do we know whether we're successful? So I can't say we always do that, but we do our best to accomplish that. Sometimes we just, sales guys are like, let's just close a deal. So we do our best. That's number one. The second thing is, again, what are those business metrics? So like Groupon saying, look, right, our SLA right now for social it was like 40%. Okay, we want to drive it to 75%. Then we said, oh, we got it to 97%. I hope you're okay with that. So those are the kinds of things we like. What are the business metrics that you care about? How does it get measured in actual dollars? And then are we achieving that? Are we helping you? And then it gives us all that sort of that North Star. So, because you can't get lost in like likes and clicks and retweets and favorites. I mean, that's nice. It's a proxy, but it doesn't move the needle. And so, fortunately, as social has matured, we've been able to help clients, set out those goals by working with them, and gives our team something to shoot for. Does that answer your question? Someone else that can make me feel good. Yes, sir.
Hi. Also think it was a great presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I was just wondering what your perspective was on where Japan is sort of in this whole evolution and the whole idea of customer experience across multiple channels.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I certainly don't know as much about Japan as I'd like to pretend I do, and there's some other folks from the Japan team here, which is about 6 months old, who probably know more. My impression is that the foundational things are exactly the same. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to ride on the subway, see everybody staring at their phones, and know that they're talking to a bunch of other people. Like, that's the fundamentals. So I think my sense is that Japanese may not be as public about ripping people on Twitter about a bad experience. But they do have a voice, and they do share things, what was the anonymous site you guys were telling me about the other day? Nichan, exactly. So you'll have, the Japanese customer is as aware as any other customer that, oh wow, I have a voice, and I can share it, and Japanese are just like everybody else, and I'm gonna listen to my friends about whether I should go to company A or company B. So I think while the symptoms may be slightly different, the surface, the fundamentals are exactly the same. I mean, I got my first cell phone in Japan in 1997, and it was like 3 years later where someone even gave me a cell phone in the US, right? So this country's always been on the cutting edge in terms of mobile and connectedness, and now I think you're just sort of seeing it take shape in a different way. But you start to see certain companies they'll have to respond. And I don't know the specifics, but my take is it may not be as pressing a need because it's not as obvious that here's a customer who's really upset with us and they're going off crazy about how ANA delayed my flight. Does ANA ever delay flights? I always have a great time with them. I would fly. I was like, took the plane over. I was like, keep the plane going. It's great. Can we just keep going around? But so it may not be as obvious, but you're gonna see, you start to, like, Nissan's a great example. Like, their North America team is the one pushing the global team to say, guys, we're already dealing with this, and you're gonna be dealing with it eventually. So you're better off rethinking how you engage with customers today and start preparing the people, the cross-silo collaboration, and obviously selfishly the technology, so you can deal with it. Because customers know. They know I have the information, they know I have power, and they know they can use it. So it'll manifest itself in different ways, but for as connected a society as Japan is, it's a no-brainer that it's already happening. It just may not be as obvious. Does that answer your question, sir? Thank you. Jim Budd.
Thanks, Chair. On the B2B folks you mentioned, particularly like EMC or Nimble, when I think data storage, I don't think, oh yeah, well, that's hot, sexy, and consumer.
Right.
Can you talk about some of the things you do, maybe a little more specifically for them or similar companies, and how it might be relevant to the folks in B2B space?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the big joke about B2B and B2C is that people say, oh, B2B and B2C are very different. I'm like, it's really not that different because you're just selling to people. What's different is who writes the check, and maybe if I want to buy a $100,000 car, I don't have to ask anybody, but if I want to buy a $5 million piece of software, I got to talk to like 30 people. Okay, those are different. But it's still about relationships. It's still about building trust. It's still about educating you. It's still about making you, that's what I call it, the hero. It's about making you look good. And maybe in Japan it's a little bit different, and that's fine. But then it's like, you don't want to look like an idiot. And the more that I can do, or the more that EMC or Cisco, perfect example, or half of our clients are B2B, the more that they can do to build a relationship, build the trust, educate, and know you as a person. I mean, think about the great B2B salesman that you know. I know you're thinking about yourself, Jim, so that's okay. When you go into a meeting with a prospect, you're like, hey, how's your family? Hey, did you see the baseball game? Hey, I see the picture you just took of your fishing trip to Alaska, or whatever it is. It's about the relationship. All we're trying to do with these companies is help them deliver those relationships, engagements, experiences at scale. And do it in a way that every time that you interact with EMC or Cisco or whoever, you're like, Oh, God, Cisco treats me like Jim. I like them. I'm more inclined to listen to them talk about their new router or whatever it is. It's the exact same thing. So that's why these companies are saying, we know customers, people buy from people. We're just helping you deliver that engagement and help you understand. Jim spends $5 million a year with us. Darren doesn't buy anything. I don't know, it depends. Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, I understood. People buy from people. I think we'd all agree with that. I think you touched on earlier, though, the decision-making process, an individual with a single point of authority versus, working within a hierarchy. Does that change the nature of how the social interaction works? Are there other things you do to help maybe enable that, identifying different touch points within that for the company?
Sure.
So on and so forth.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what you're starting to see is companies like Microsoft's a good example of this also, because obviously they have a big B2B business, is, how are they connecting in with, say, LinkedIn and using that organizational map to kind of understand what's the hierarchy there, who are the people, and then, connecting that, we actually do this ourselves, connecting that with your CRM, so you can say, okay, the organizational map you have, what's the social profiles, who reports to who's more social, who's the economic buyer, who's the influencer, and what have you, and trying to, that's more sophisticated stuff, so there are very few companies that are at that level, but they're all thinking about that. So I think you're seeing that same type of, orchestrated B2B sale that, every sales book along the way, there's Roger leaving now, so there you go. Should I not have called him out on that one? Oh well, it's fine. The wheels are off, it doesn't matter. So I think you're starting to see how can we apply that same discipline that a great B2B salesperson would have and allow an organization to support at scale so that you don't email the same white paper to 30 people. You use their social information. You know that Jonathan likes basketball and Darren likes baseball or whatever it is, and he's the economic buyer and he's the procurement guy. How to use that, he cares about ROI, he cares about competitive advantage or whatever it is. I think you're starting to see that. So I think those things, that's why they have to come together, because relationships are not just transactional and they're not just social. They're the combination of the two. Is that acceptable? All right, that's fine. One more question to make me feel like my trip to Japan was worth it. Thanks.
Hi, Jay here with McDonald's Japan, and as many people know, lots of stuff gets posted in Twitter regarding our particular service.
Some people do share things about McDonald's.
Yes, exactly.
We just did an event at McDonald's 2 weeks ago. Did you know that? In Chicago.
Yes, I did know that.
That's good. You guys are a great client, and we appreciate it.
And we are actually wonderful clients. So big shout outs to Sprinklr Japan, because
that's where we drop
clients here.
Love you, man.
Yeah.
Give him a Sprinklr t-shirt and whatever else he wants.
Well, I do think that, we have been able to manage quite a bit of, we probably have 20 more emergencies than we currently have because we're able to do it the way that we are right now. So that's, they definitely deserve the credit. I think the question that I have is just curious about the case studies that are happening globally is, you guys have basically built a wonderful Ferrari of a technology piece here. The challenge, I think,
being live stream part, this part. Go ahead.
The challenge, I think, that I'm curious how other companies are approaching it is we need, for this F1 race car is F1 drivers, right? So, social is a relatively new service. It's hard to find someone with 25 years of social experience to operate this F1 driver. So, how are the other companies either finding people to operate the systems, or how are they up-training their existing base to get them to use this in a knowledgeable way?
That is a fantastic question. It really is. I'm not just BSing you. That's totally a great question, because what we're starting to see is in certain companies, and McDonald's is a great example, and some of the new guys you just got who came from other places like Groupon and Microsoft, actually, Groupon, McDonald's is building the social dream team here, by the way, and you're on it. I'm going to just guess because you're here. What you're starting to see is there's certain people who are stepping up and saying, look, we got to bring all this disjointed nonsense together. One of the biggest banks in the U.S., there's a guy who's like, I'm doing this. Verizon, I got a story about Verizon that I'll come back, I promise, but I got a great story about Verizon. So Verizon has a 2-minute SLA on social. 2 minutes. So last December, I had basically taken my own router down. It was my fault because I was playing around with stuff, but I didn't have internet access, and it was 1 in the morning, and I was like, If my wife wakes up at 6:30 and she can't get her email, I'm a dead man. What do I do? And I was like, I played around with enough to know that I needed Verizon's help. So I'm like, let's stress test this system. So at 1 a.m., I tweet Verizon. And I'm like, because I went to the website, call center's closed, the chat's not available. So I tweet them, 1:02, and I will show you the tweet stream. They say, hey, can you follow us so we can direct message you? Fine. So they say, okay. And they say, oh, is it okay if whoever calls you? And I'm like, sure. So the guy calls me at 1:05 in the morning. And he says, yep, okay, I see what your problem is. I need to reset your DHCP address, blah, blah, bang, bang, bang. 1:07, done, I'm up and running. And I was like, that's amazing. 1 a.m. to 1:07, Verizon, who, let's be honest, not the greatest reputation for customer experience, sorry, totally delivered at 1:07 in the morning. And I was like, God, you guys are amazing. And they said, that's great. You know, is there anything else that we can do for them? I'm like, you guys are fantastic. This is fantastic. They're like, all right, well, Jeremy, just so you know, if we ever have a Sprinklr issue, we're going to call you. And I'm like, dude, you guys flipped the script on me. They checked out my profiled me, and realized that they were using Sprinklr to answer. And I was like, I went from customer to vendor pretty quickly, so that wasn't so much fun. But they delivered. Why? The reason why is there's a guy at Verizon in the US who basically said, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to lead the charge. And he said, I'm going to get the right people in here. We're going to make sure they have the training, put them through the system, add them in training. We're going to have the documentations, the manuals, all the stuff like how do you engage with the Verizon voice, the experience that we want. So a lot of it is hiring the right people. A lot of it is the documentation to make sure that they know, and the training to make sure they know how to engage. A lot of it is giving them the tools to have that visibility. If you look at that tweet stream from Verizon, what's so remarkable is over the course of these back and forth direct messages, there's like 7 different people involved. But they all were able to maintain the context of the conversation and treat me like me. It was ridiculous. I should get this in HBR now that I think about it. You know, so I think what you're seeing is there's a new class of person who kind of starts straddling the traditional silos, starts making the business case to the C-suite, and is starting to say, we need to give people the training. That we're dealing with a different type of customer now. And you can't just be Verizon like you've always been Verizon, with all due respect, Darren. And I know I should pick on another company, except for Darren, because he got me here. But it was a great example, you know. So I think that's what you're saying is you're saying, look, we're not going to, I appreciate you calling us a Ferrari or Formula One, we'll take it. And you're right, not everyone can jump into a Formula One car and drive it at 200 miles an hour on day one. But what you can do is say, okay, let's get you in the car. Let's make sure you know how to work the clutch. Let's make sure you can drive around the train. Okay, you've gone around 5 times. Now, let's put you in the simulator and make sure that you can do it without blowing up your $500 million machine or whatever these cars cost. So you're starting to see that gradual improvement, but it all starts with there's usually one guy or gal who says the old way of the point solutions isn't working. We have to do things differently because we have the Bettina Siegels of the world out there. Our competitors are delivering better experiences and everybody knows about it. We have no choice. And so they start that and it's just like, okay, we're going to put Sprinklr in. And then our job is to say, okay, let us help you by connecting you to that's like the event we did yesterday was 86 people, and it was about how do you bring together people who are facing the same challenges. We don't have all the answers, but we can share with you what we know, share with you the data that we have from how people are performing, and connect you with other people like on our client advisory board, our events and all that, so we can all figure it out together. So super long story. I just like the Verizon story, and the coffee's still kicking in. So does that kind of address what you're saying? You're very generous. Let's get him a shirt again. All right.